here we go. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm super excited to be at today's webinar today. It's been a couple weeks since I've been here. So thank you all for joining us. We are here to learn about mastering AI overviews for greater search visibility. I am here with Tim, Global VP of Professional Services at Botify, and Ray, CEO of DemandSphere. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So, maybe we told, you guys, but definitely our audience loves data. So I'm really excited for what you're bringing to the table today. You're going to dig into a detailed analysis that you all performed on over, I think, 120,000 queries that happened on Google. Is that right?
Yeah, we looked at 120,000 and change SERPs.
Awesome. So, attendees out there, you're going to walk away with some ways that you can get some great visibility. So let me go over these housekeeping tips just super quick, and then I'm going to get out of here. So we have closed captioning if you need it. It's the little CC in the top right of your screen. Give that a click. We are going to be doing Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you have questions for Tim and Ray, definitely use that Q&A tab and let us know what those are. If you see a question that you like, give it a little thumbs up, and that'll know that it's a little more important for you all out there. We'll do our best to get them answered. Before you leave today's call, we do have a short survey. Just lets us know how today's webinar went and what we can do better in the future. And with that, you will receive today's recording and the slides in your inbox later today. Okay, so with housekeeping out of the way, we're going to start today's webinar with a couple quick polls. So let's start with this one. How confident are you in the future of the SEO industry? Tim, Ray, anything you want to add to that while people are getting started?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the results on this poll. I think it's my personal opinion. I just voted as well, is that it's full of opportunities. There are going to be a lot of changes, but this is, in my opinion, one of the most exciting times.
Awesome. While that one is running, for those who have already answered that one, I'm going to throw another one up here. That how have your impressions and clicks in Google Search Console trended over the past 6 months? So let's throw this one up too. In place. So we can see 82%. So for the first one, let's just talk real quick. So we can see that 82% of you are confident about how you feel about the future of SEO. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah. And so for our second one, I'll leave this up here for a few seconds so everybody can kind of see. Ray, Tim, anything to add to these? Otherwise, I'll close these out and hand it over to you.
Yeah, I think we're going to be covering a lot of this, and it's exciting to see that people are mostly optimistic about the future. And even though most people are seeing a downtrend in clicks, and I think that is very common across several industries right now.
Definitely.
Yep. I agree.
Great.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves and get to it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the great intro. And I am personally very excited to be here, as I'm sure Ray is as well. It seems like a really killer turnout. So thank you to Heather and Search Engine Journal for putting this together. We have some pretty exciting data. I'm glad everyone here loves data, of course. We've partnered on a study looking at 120,000 SERPs, right? And we are specifically looking to see when AI overviews are triggering and when they're not, and giving you some pretty insightful information that hopefully should inspire you or point you in the right direction of things that you can do actually today. Like right out of this webinar, you can walk out of here and do some things and put yourself in a pretty good position to deal with all these changes. So let me introduce myself first. My name is Tim Resnick, and as Heather mentioned, I am the VP of Professional Services at Botify. I have quite a long history in SEO. I've been tied to the hip, or at least tangentially related to SEO since 2001, 2002. So way back in the day, kind of a dinosaur. And I've seen a lot of the changes throughout the years. And we've always heard SEO is dying. and it never really has. And I'm glad most of you still think it's not dying. And Ray and I hold that same viewpoint. We think this is a great opportunity. We think that, in fact, SEO and SEOs, practitioners here in this room, at the Sphere's tip to be able to lead in understanding what's going to happen and how people search the internet and how people search for information and how people are going to leverage this as marketers to be able to drive traffic and drive commerce. So we're really excited to be here. We'll be talking a little bit about Botify. So I'll introduce what Botify is for those who don't know. But we've been around for over a decade, and we really started out as just an enterprise cloud-based crawler, one of the first to really be able to scale and go deep for large websites. And since we've released a lot of great products, we have our rendering product called SpeedWorkers, and we integrate a lot of data, logs data, Google Search Console, analytics data, all in one platform, so you can get a full view of what you're looking at, right, in terms of how Google specifically is crawling and interacting with your site. Now, things have changed quite a bit, and we're in a great position to be able to serve some of these use cases around AI and generative AI in terms of understanding what content you have, being able to structure that, being able to push that data to search engines, and being able to push that data into some of these generative experiences. So for more of that information, you can always follow up with us. We'd be more than happy to talk to you. And with that, I'll pass it on to Ray to introduce himself and DemandSphere.
Oops, slide too fast. Okay. My name is Ray Griesler. I'm the founder of DemandSphere. We've been in business for 15 years, and we are a SERP analytics platform. We serve primarily the needs of in-house SEO teams and agencies as well. We work with global brands, startups, companies of all sizes, and we do take a particular focus on very large volume needs, but really our kind of bread and butter is going deep into a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about today. We look very closely at the visual aspect of the SERPs and turn that into a lot of actionable data that can be used to prioritize the right opportunities for growth. Our core platform is called Demand Metrics, and this is our platform that gets used every day by the types of teams that I mentioned. And then we also have an extension of that called SERP Intelligence, which is a BigQuery-based data warehouse, completely fully managed. So it's a very easy implementation, and that powers a lot of additional teams and intelligence beyond that.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's talk about the modern SERP a little bit. Now, it has changed a lot over the time I've been in the industry, the last 20 or so years. It's changed a lot just in the last couple of years. And now there's over 300 different SERP features that come up. So you never really know what you're going to get, right? Like every search is going to be a little bit different. Now you add AI overviews into that, and it's a game changer. AI overviews, in a sense, are a whole new SERP within a SERP that has its own features. So really wild stuff going on. And back in 2023 alone, Google made 5,000 changes to the SERP. And this is like before AI overviews even existed. So 5,000 changes to the SERP in 1 year. That's 15 changes per day to the SERP. So things have always changed a lot. Things are going to continue to change a lot, and we got to be prepared. Now, traditional search metrics, such as Google Search Console, totally table stakes. Obviously, you have to be using these. It's one of our only viewpoints into how Google views our site, right? It's data that they're giving us on keywords, impressions, clicks, etc. You should be using bulk export as well if you have a large site. So now Google allows you to basically download all of your keywords to BigQuery. So make sure you do that. But you have to use other things as well. We have to go beyond just your traditional Google Search Console metrics, and we have to understand more about what's going on the SERPs. And Ray's going to tell us a little more about that.
So the interesting thing about Search Console data, and this is obviously by far the most deployed tool among all the teams that we look at when we first start talking to people, is there's a lot of really valuable information. And I think that based on the way that Search Console is structured, we all kind of have this funnel of the search, the way the search traffic plays out in our minds. You have average position, which is going to dictate obviously the number of impressions that you can get, and then you're going to have some sort of click-through rate, which is obviously derived from overall clicks. And so we call these basically two questions around what happened and then some derived metrics on that. The challenge that a lot of people are running into, particularly over the last few years, is that everyone is seeing a decline, or not everyone, but a lot of people are seeing a decline in click-through rates. And there's not a lot of good explanation why within these traditional tool sets. And the reason for that is because there is a very large visual impact on the SERP that is happening and impacting user behavior, but it's not being accounted for within these tools. So one of the things that we believe is the most important ways to start answering these questions is to take that same visual impact and turn that into data that can be used to understand what would be affecting that user behavior as they're searching for something. And so, in the traditional behavioral analytics world, you have heat maps, and you can kind of do the same thing on the SERPs by measuring the pixel impact of various SERP features and looking at things like fold depth metrics, whether or not you're on the first fold. And we see a lot of cases where you may be ranking in the top 3 organic positions, but you're still below the first fold. And this is something that is happening as Google continues to launch additional SERP features that push down that fold depth. And this is because each one of those SERP features themselves have their own pixel height. And so understanding what the pixel height of the elements above you are, what your pixel depth of your organic rankings are, and where you sit in that fold is a very important set of insights to be managing.
Yeah, and I mean we've all seen these heat map studies, right? In terms of where people's eyes go. We've never seen a heat map study that shows people's eyes go to the bottom of the screen, right? It's always to the top left-hand corner, and that will always be true, most likely. And so we have to deal with the number of pixels. It's not just important in terms of the number or your ranking, but in terms of your relative ranking, of course, of where you are compared to all these different modules on the page. And real quick, I'm noticing we have a lot of great questions coming through, a lot of great engagement in the chat. So just remember in the Q&A tab, if you have questions, just put them in there. We're going to have a whole 30 minutes at the end to answer them. So the anatomy of an AI overview, when we're talking about pixel depth, you can see it takes up a lot of the page. So are these the new 10 blue links to the right-hand side? We're going to see. But we know that the traditional 10 blue links are way down on the page now.
Yeah. So this is the thing that we wanted to start studying in this data set. So what we did is we took a look at a total of 120,000 and some change keywords, but we wanted to do this across a wide variety of websites and industries. So we took a total of 22 websites that we had sourced, and we broke that into 10 e-commerce marketplaces, 10 brands, and then 2 publishers. And we started with a data set of 36,000 keywords and then turned that into an additional 85,000 informational keywords. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how we sourced some of that here in the next few slides. So a couple of things that we want to frame in terms of understanding this data and looking at it. The first one is it's really important to be measuring this for your own brand. There's a lot of interesting research out there right now, a lot of studies, and one caution that we would provide is be wary of anything that claims to be the definitive view on the state of things on the internet. It's just doesn't really work that way. Things are very much dependent on what keywords, what sites you're looking at. The way that the AI overviews themselves actually present day-to-day change quite a bit. We've got a lot of interesting data around that. So Google is still very much in their own testing phase too. So measuring it for yourself is very important.
So the global, this is not yet a global rollout, right? A lot of this is US centric. And Google has done this a lot in their history, which they keep things pretty close to home, which makes sense. If you all remember when they came out with Google Maps, it was not in Europe for a couple of years, and they gradually rolled it out country by country. So today, if you go to France, you're likely not to see the global AI overviews. However, in the next couple months, maybe years, who knows when it's going to be, it will come.
And third one is that the way people respond to these, especially across global markets, we see this a lot in Asia versus the US. So the rollout is not complete, but even in the countries where Google has announced it and they've started to test some of the display of these, when people encounter them, they react very differently. And so that's something that is worth paying attention to, especially if you're managing a brand or set of properties across many different markets. So let's talk about a little bit more about how we decided to source this data. We wanted to focus on two primary intent categories. One was commercial, for obvious reasons. That's, these are the keywords that are most often attributed to driving revenue. And then informational. And the reason we wanted to go informational is because probably everyone here has seen this as well, but the overall appearance rate of AI overviews on informational type intent based queries tends to be a lot higher. And so a lot of the research that we had seen prior to this point was kind of somewhat defensive in posture. And it was kind of like, okay, how do we know how bad it's going to be? And our stance was a little bit different, which was basically, given that we know that these are not going away and Google is going to continue to promote these, what can we do to actually trigger the appearance of these as much as possible? And so what we did was we sourced that initial data set of 36,000 keywords with commercial intent. And then we used those to scrape all of the people also asked questions on each one of those and then turn those into the remaining 85,000 keywords. And what that did was it gave us a nice high appearance rate for 47% of the keywords overall, although if you break it down, you do see very predictable drop-offs between commercial and informational. So we'll talk about that here on the next slide.
Yeah, so I found this methodology fascinating. Many of you have probably searched for something commercially, running shoes, for example, and you'll notice that an AI overview doesn't come up. And I've personally never had an AI overview come up for a commercial query. And this is obvious. Google is a little worried about their revenue model, right? And so the fact that how we did this was we took the commercial queries, and then we took the informational part of the commercial queries, which is the people also asked down beneath the results, and ran those back in, and we're able to actually trigger some of these. So while we didn't get AI overviews on all the commercial queries, we did get them on a portion, and we were able to glean some insights.
That was my bad. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what we're finding is pretty similar to what we see today in terms of long tail. There's many of these queries have not that many searches to them, and the long tail is still alive, and it's going to be alive. In fact, there's been this number floating around Google for a while that 15% of all queries ever searched for have never been searched before. So like in each given day, 15% of the queries, it ends up being something like 750,000 searches per minute are brand new searches that have never been searched for before. So if you think about it, with conversational searching, this isn't going to change. This is just going to increase, right? It's almost like every query, every conversation is unique, and the long tail will definitely still be alive.
The other thing that we noticed was that featured snippets are not going away. So the featured snippets was kind of filling the role that AI overviews are now before they were launched. And there are some interesting reasons for that. And the interesting thing, though, we noticed was that even when there was an AI overview present, and many times, 60% of the time, you would still see a featured snippet directly below it. Long term, I don't think that's going to be the case necessarily, but it's something that needs to be continued to be monitored. But it's something that is very important to be measuring for reasons that we're going to discuss on the next slide, which is going back to this question of pixel height and impact. So again, going back to how deep are the organic rankings? How far down are they being pushed? And how high are each one of these elements measured in pixels? That starts to add up pretty quickly when you have multiple elements on top of them, especially if these are the type of results that are more zero-click in nature. So on average, and this is across both desktop and mobile, although we're looking at desktop primarily for this right now. In general, you're looking at just under 400 pixels for a collapsed, which is the default state for every AIO that appears, just under 400 pixels. And your average pixel height for a featured snippet is just under 240 pixels. You combine those together, you got around 632 pixels in terms of height. And if you look at your average screen resolution across devices, 950, 940 to roughly 1,000 pixels high. So you're looking at basically a visual impact of, on average, 65, 67% visual impact just from those elements alone. So you can imagine what that's going to do to click-through rates on the organic side.
Right. So really, who knows how people are going to interact with actual content in here and how it's going to drive you traffic, or is it going to really be just a zero-click result? We don't know that. What we can probably assume, based on what we've talked about with pixels so far, is that, especially on mobile, imagine this thing coming up on a mobile device. How many times are people going to scroll to go down and click on the link? So the takeaway is, if you're not in this result, you're most likely not going to get any visibility. You're definitely not going to get a click, and no one's going to see you. So it's going to be absolutely critical that your content and hopefully your links appear in this module.
All right, we're going to talk about breaking things into head, mid, and long tail. There are two basic ways of doing this. One is looking at search volume buckets, and that's going to somewhat depend on your site, the type of impressions that you're seeing. But for this particular breakdown, we're looking more at the phrase length or query length. And so just very briefly, we broke head into 1 to 2 words, mid into 3 to 4 words, and long tail was anything 5 words or longer. And what we saw here was, in general, and this is to be expected based on our own kind of anecdotal observations, is that, again, the appearance rate of AIOs definitely leans towards long tail keywords, especially within informational type queries.
Yeah, so the trend is definitely going to be even more commercial eventually, but still we're in this informational keyword phase where there's going to be plenty of opportunities to rank within these informational queries.
So the other thing that we need to start looking at is, and this goes into the question of like, okay, what are the takeaways? What can I start doing to think about this? We looked at another question too. And this question is, what do we need to do in order to start being included in the AIO overview citation links? So we talked briefly about the anatomy of what these things look like. You have your overview text and you have your links on the side. And similar to many other SERP features, will somewhat function going forward as kind of a mini SERP. And so we started to look at what are the factors that appear to be relevant to appearing. And one of the most important takeaways was that in this particular data set, more than 75% of the links in these citations came from position 12 on the organic ranking or higher. And so what that points to is all of the traditional SEO fundamentals still very much apply here, because Google is using their own organic index to provide relevant links back to people.
Yeah, this is the first kind of just really big, exciting takeaway here. 75% of the AI overviews, those links within the AI overviews, are coming from the traditional links below that result. So that means we can continue to do a lot of the things that we've done throughout the years to be able to drive rankings within those traditional results to better ensure that we're in those positions.
The other thing that is worth looking at here is, so we've talked about the organic ranking and appearing in those top 10 to 12 results. The other one is this topic that you may have heard of, which is part of the larger discussion around the big shift from lexical to semantic search. And this has obviously been a process that's been playing out over the last 10 plus years. But we're really seeing it now with these types of SERP features. And so you may hear the term cosine similarity being used quite a bit. And I'm going to explain what this means here a little bit more here on the next slide. But the basic idea is that you can convert text or other forms of media. There's different, models out there to do this, but we're going to talk about text for now. You can convert text to integer arrays, and the very oversimplified explanation for this is if you convert your text into numbers, you can do math on it. And the reason you would want to do that is you would want to measure the distance between different clusters of topics and keywords within whatever set of concepts you're talking about. So just to walk through that a little bit more visually, we've got some keywords over here on the left. When you're vectorizing the text, or this, you can call it creating embeddings. It's kind of the same thing, roughly. And so what you're doing is you're creating these arrays or vectors of integers that all represent each one of these terms, and then those get clustered into a multi-dimensional model. Which for humans, we usually break it down to 3 dimensions so we can visualize it. And you'll see these clusters of topics within these models. And so when we're looking at doing something like a cosine similarity measurement, we're basically measuring the distance between these terms. And so you can use that across larger bodies of text to evaluate. You can generate a score off of this called a cosine similarity score, which is basically the overall result of that calculation. And so what that would look like in this context, we run this, and we did this for this study as well, is we would take the overview text that was generated by Google directly from their foundational model, and then we would crawl each one of the URLs in the citation links, and then we would generate the embeddings for both of those body sets of text, and then we would run the cosine similarity. Because, the running theory around a lot of this, not only for AIOs, but a lot of different SERP features in general, is that there is some sort of similarity metric being used to select these links in addition to what is appearing in the organic rankings. And so that was something that we thought was really important to measure as part of this study. And not surprisingly, we see a lot of correlation between these. This is something we've built this directly into our research tools now, and we're seeing it all the time. There's a very strong correlation between the cosine similarity, of the text back to the generated overview model. We're going to talk about more why that is the case in a few minutes here.
So yeah, big insight number 2 here. Wow, it's really actually actionable. The fact that you're able to see that the content within overview is coming directly from the pages that are ranking below means that you can really start to figure out what is the sort of tone, what is the sort of language being used, what's the sort of content being used to drive that appearance in the AI overview. So, what we did in this study, it was, if you're going to do a full scale study like this, sure, it's quite difficult to look at 120,000 SERPs, pull down that data, crawl the sites that are actually ranking, do cosine similarity. And you certainly could do that and should do that if you have time, or you should hire someone like Ray to do that for you. But you can also just, to start, like today, out of this, just use your eyes, right? Like go to Google Search Console, look at your non-branded terms that are driving traffic, and probably start with the ones that are more informational in nature, and start looking at those, right? And look at, maybe even grab some data in terms of where your competitors are ranking for these terms and you are not, and see what is happening, right? Just use your eyes to kind of do the same thing that Ray just explained, and you're going to actually find a lot of insights there. So that was a lot about Google, which of course is very important. Breaking news, hot take: Google's not going away anytime soon. I do think, though, we've seen a lot of people, right? Like Rand Fishkin recently has posted some stuff on LinkedIn talking about, like, a little bit like the hype, maybe the hype isn't real. Maybe these things aren't really cutting into Google's market share that much. And he says that Google's market share is actually growing. Engagement on Google is actually growing, which can be true, but it also can be true that these are also growing at the same time, which means the pie is getting bigger. People are searching for more things. People are doing more things on more of these platforms. So while we should focus a lot of our attention right now on Google, because that's still the majority of the traffic and they're not going away, and they are going to lead the space in many ways, they're also going to tread pretty lightly. If you think about it, it's classic innovator's dilemma. They are the incumbent. They are entrenched in terms of their revenue model and how they make money with paid search, specifically around PLAs. They're not going to mess with that too much, right? They're going to be pretty careful. However, ChatGPT, Perplexity, even Bing, they're probably going to be willing to take a few more leaps and push the envelope. We've already seen Perplexity do this with their agentic shopping, and they're starting to do things with presenting products within their results. So we got to keep an eye on those, and I would say almost use those as your sandbox, right? Don't over optimize and put all your attention on these new things, but play around with them and see what happens. Let me tell you a few ways to start thinking about that. So as a lot of you know, LLMs, how they're built typically is on a corpus of training data that's not fresh, right? If you ask ChatGPT right now, they're going to tell you that they're trained from data from October 2023. So it's not very new. So if you search for the weather or the news, typically in just a standard model, you're not going to get great results, right? It's kind of static. People ask a question, it queries, it returns really smart answers, but maybe not up to date. So how do they deal with that? They use RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, and they're actually interrupting the question, right? So they're interrupting the question and sending it off to an index, right? Sending it off to, in this case, many cases, Bing. And then it's processed by the LLM, and then it's returned as an answer. And we're starting to see this work really well across all the generative AI. ChatGPT obviously came out with their search. They also do it now just in their regular chat. So the stuff is already happening. And Bing is driving a lot of this. The index of Bing is driving a lot of this. So Perplexity, OpenAI, Copilot, obviously, is querying Bing in this RAG sort of way. So anything that's not Google related, you still want to start thinking of Bing. And a lot of times I think as SEOs, we've thought of Bing as like, oh yeah, they're the ones who've been around for 15 years and really haven't taken any market share, really haven't changed the experience, haven't done anything. So we've ignored them. We've always said like, well, what we do for Google is good enough for Bing. I think that's changing slightly, and you got to start thinking about Bing. Start using Bing Webmasters tools. Start checking out what's going on these other platforms, specifically when you suspect there's some sort of real-time augmentation happening with that process that I just showed you. So another interesting thing, and why on this slide I said this is the case today, but tomorrow, who knows? Because what we're seeing, a lot of these players, a lot of these generative search players are starting to crawl the web themselves, right? We know ChatGPT has 3 different crawlers that they use. We know Perplexity is crawling. They've been accused of ignoring robots.txt. We know there's a lot of activity going on. And we as Botify know this because we collect log data across many different industries. And here you're seeing a snapshot across, I believe this is e-com, major retailers in the US of our clients. And the time frame you're looking here is just like a month. So, and this is ChatGPT, the user-based crawler, and it's basically tripled in the last month. And this is just going to continue. And we're seeing this more and more with some of our clients. We were at a big client meeting the other day. We're presenting some of the log information around the bots that were crawling their sites. And it was shocking to see that the number 3 crawler of their site, total crawler after Google, after Bing, was a crawler called ByteSpider. Or I think the name of the user agent specifically was was TikTok LLM. So what are they doing? They're crawling this major retailer, basically taking all of their catalog and they're training a model somewhere. So TikTok is training a model. There's speculation in the media that they're actually training the Chinese kind of copycat model of ChatGPT. So these are things we have to start looking at, right? As technical SEOs, like how are our sites being consumed by these bots? And is it worth it for us? If we're a publisher and these bots are taking our content and using it, maybe it is worth it if we get some sort of attribution, some sort of value out of it, but maybe it isn't. So this is going to be a big question for people in our industry to answer over the next few years. So just some tactics that we'd like to recommend in terms of how to deal with some of this stuff, how to deal with getting your content in AI overviews and in these different generative chat platforms. And these, you're going to look in, you're going to say, oh, these look like kind of your standard timeless tactics, which they are. And they're still very, very important. You need to focus on them. So we need to make sure that crawl budget's good, that the right pages are being crawled, right? And the right pages are being indexed. And your strategic pages are at the top of your information architecture, at the top of your taxonomy and hierarchy. And that you're serving the pages quickly, right, to Google. It's not taking 10,000 milliseconds to render JavaScript on your page and being able to serve it, because eventually these crawlers are going to ignore it. So we have some other interesting data, and we don't have it actually in this slide deck, but we found that 50% of the content of many of our customers that is indexable and has some value, Google will often ignore. They don't even crawl it. And even worse, 20% of all the traffic that comes from Google to these sites, 20% of those pages are never even crawled by Bing. So it's an even bigger problem on Bing. And that's why we have to make sure we put a little bit of effort in that. Sitemaps, you got to keep them clean, keep the 404s out of there, keep the redirects out of there, only canonical URLs, all those good old fashioned tips that we've been doing forever. But this last one's really important too, especially, if you're in e-commerce, right? So shopping feeds, I believe, are going to be driving a lot of these shopping experiences within these generative AI platforms. As we know, it's already driving the organic shopping experience on Google. I suspect that's going to be leveraged somehow in AI overviews. So if you're e-commerce and you don't have a feed, make a feed. If you're e-commerce and you have a feed, make sure that it's up to date, make sure it's robust, it has all the structured data in there with all your product information. So that's something, if you don't know about Google Merchant Center, you can go check it out. 2 more tactics. Index Now. So Index Now is this open protocol to basically push URLs to a bunch of different search engines, mainly Bing in this case, and letting them know either that you have a new URL or a new piece of content, that a piece of your content has changed, or you've removed a piece of content. So there's no reason not to do this. It's fairly easy to set up, and you can do it immediately and probably start seeing gains in Bing. And then obviously this is going to help you with some of the RAG stuff that we were talking about before too. And again, push to Bing, slightly different. This is where you can actually push your full, it's like content submission, like your full page, right, to Bing. And this is via an API. I think there's some limits in terms of how much you can push. If you're a bigger site and you have a lot of pages, you can talk to us because we do have a relationship with Bing where we can push at scale as well. So you can just let us know there. But this is another thing that if you can do, you should do.
So there's one of the challenges that we see. I don't care if you're a massive company with a decent size SEO team versus a startup. At the end of the day, everyone has very similar problems. And it's the fact that we're dealing with essentially chaotic, somewhat non-deterministic environments. There's a lot of information that we're all in charge of trying to stay on top of and communicate to other teams and management. And there's always a struggle of, okay, what should I do? And we found that the companies that, and I know this is true for Botify as well, but whenever we work with category leading companies that are doing well in search, it comes down to having a very simple workflow for treating all this data as something that requires action. And so, from a little bit of background in cybersecurity and so forth, everything comes down to what is the life cycle of the intelligence that you're generating, and then what feedback loops are you operating based on that. And the companies that are good at defining and managing those feedback loops and those life cycles are the ones that tend to win, especially if they are good at iterating quickly through those. So I know in the startup world, there's a lot of analogies there as well to the more times you can iterate, if you can outpace other players, usually you'll do very well. So this is an important thing that I can tell right away when I start working with a company if they're going to be successfully ultimately, and it comes down to their commitment to manage things on this level.
Great. I think that's all we have. And I want to mention one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning, but we've done a complete white paper on this, and we're going to publish it exclusively to all you here first next week. So you will be, if you've registered with your email address here, you'll be receiving an email, and it's a thick document with a lot of the details here that we talked about. I'll hand it back to Heather at this point, I think.
Awesome. All right. Before we go to Q&A, I'm going to launch a quick poll. So now that you've seen this, everything that Ray and Tim put together, thank you guys so much, by the way. Which statement best describes the future of the search industry in the next 3 to 5 years? What do you think? And while that poll should have popped up for you, make sure you check out the handouts tab, and we're going to get to some Q&A. Are you ready to do this, gentlemen? Because I'll tell you, there's a lot of questions.
Let's do it.
All right, cool. So real quick, this poll, we got 54% saying the overall pie is growing and Google will dominate and many new players will be successful. So not real surprise. Okay, so we got William DeLong asks, and I'm going to max these because it's a little easier for you guys to read them. So what tools do you recommend for tracking AIOs that show up in SERPs for various queries that are affecting web search traffic?
Well, should I answer this since I'm not affiliated with DemandSphere?
I think you should, yeah.
I think you should use DemandSphere. That's all. Go ahead, Ray, if you have a different answer.
No, I obviously would agree with that. And it's an interesting question because it's obviously such a new field, and the challenges around measuring it over the last year were very interesting. Just as a quick anecdote, a year ago and up until really May of this year, you had to be a logged in Google user in order to even get anything. Obviously, everyone was referring to it as SGE back at the time, and now those have kind of forked. And so at the time, we ended up building a pretty large farm of logged in Gmail users to get that data. Luckily, we don't have to do that anymore. So it's easier to get the data. But the other interesting aspect about it is if you're not capturing this data with a JavaScript rendering enabled tool set, you're not going to be able to get the actual AI overview data about 50% of the time right now. I think that'll change over time too, but lots of interesting kind of challenges and anecdotes around that topic.
Oh, you should, Ray, you should share that anecdote around the JavaScript and some of the theories around caching these things. I think that's super interesting. Yeah,
so it's kind of what I was alluding to, but to go into a little bit more detail, that when you, as a scraper, and I know there's probably a lot of scrapers here in this community as well, but basically you can do what would be like a direct HTTP using traditional tool sets to get data from whatever site you're scraping. In this case, we're talking about Google, of course. You can get data on AI overviews about half of the time right now. And so what we think is going on there is for certain types of queries, Google has kind of landed on what they're going to use for that AI overview text. And they're good. That's all getting generated out of their own foundational models. And once they're happy with it, it's kind of like getting cached, we think. And for the times where it's not showing up, and if you want to capture it, you would need to use a fully JavaScript enabled browser session to get it, that's where we think they're testing things more, and it's still more dynamic. It's still coming out of their foundational models, but they're probably tweaking things to get different types of results there.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to pull this down, and I saw this question somewhere. So I'm just going to, what type of actions can I take to analyze cosine similarly on my main keywords?
Yep, that's a good question as well. Like I mentioned earlier, obviously we do provide some tools for this, but I think it's a growing area too. We're going to see a lot more come out around this. It's still rather technical. The most hands-on way of doing it, you'll usually see a lot of different ways of doing this with Python. Google has their Gemini APIs. You can do this pretty easily if you have someone to kind of walk you through it. You can play with their embedding models, and the cosine similarity measurement itself is actually just a standard, kind of math function that's out there. So you can run that against any set of embeddings that you've created. It's more a question of which embedding model you're using. So still, I'm sorry, it's still very kind of nerdy in that regard. But I think we're going to see a lot more of that coming out as well.
So with tied for first place with 16 votes, Kitty's question, how can content writers optimize on-page content for AI overviews? Any tips here?
I'll start. And I think we talked about this a little bit with regards to just looking to see either using cosine similarity or using your eyes and looking to see essentially what the tone of these SERPs are, right? And what the tone of the AI overview is. I mean, I'm not suggesting that you use AI to write your content, but I would certainly use it as a co-pilot to do so. For me, I'd probably take directly some of that content out of the AI overview and start having a conversation with the AI and understanding like what is the tone, what's the best, and you obviously taking some unique spin on it that you have, unique data that you have. I think that's really going to be important as well, like something that is proprietary. It's not just the same old stuff spun up every time. And then take a stab and see how it's performing. Ray, anything to add there?
No, I think that is obviously at the end of the day, we need to be writing for our searchers and our users is what it comes down to. I think that there's some risk, even though we're very big proponents of doing, semantic similarity analysis, we may see Google respond to people over optimizing for this. Back in the day, I think of, keyword stuffing from 15 years ago. There is maybe some risk of entity stuffing type behavior getting recognized by Google down the road. And a lot of the tools that are focused around AI writing kind of encourage this. So be reasonable, be thoughtful about it when you're doing it. I wouldn't just go build an entire strategy on cosine similarity alone by any means. But it's definitely worth having as part of your arsenal.
Absolutely. Nothing's more important than the reader, though, right?
Yep.
And who that content's for. Which brings us to a point, because you talked about all the changes. So Shrook is wondering, what SEO KPIs should we consider in light of the changes?
From our side, some of the things that I was talking about at the beginning, we really think that SERP data, regardless of where you get this data, is one of the most undervalued assets in terms of deriving intelligence from it and for understanding consumer behavior, because it still is the largest driver of traffic on the internet. And so just the shape of that SERP, understanding the way that the layout is affecting that user behavior is something that absolutely needs to be measured. And so that's going to, bring in some of the new KPIs that we talked about, things like your visual ranking, SERP layout shift, pixel depth, fold metrics, these sorts of things from we call it pre-click analytics. Post-click would be anything that happens to your site. Now we have pre-click and in many cases zero click. And so if you want to understand that, you have to be looking at the origin of that behavior.
Yeah, I would add to this in that you certainly want to be looking. I mean, traditionally we've looked at share of voice, right? And trying to understand how we're doing in specific keyword markets. And that was relatively easy. You could use tools that would tell you what you're ranking, what your competitors are ranking, and you get some sort of idea. I think I think attention is probably going to become the new click in a lot of ways. Like, of course, clicks are still going to exist, but as AIs get better, there's going to be the journey from like whatever the intent of the user is to whatever the end goal of the user is going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. And I think that means like fewer searches, fewer clicks, all those things. So ultimately, like getting that click is going to be the most valuable thing, because once that click comes, it's probably going to convert, right? So what becomes important then is understanding your share of voice for attention, right? And that's something I think we don't really have the tools yet to measure. We've all probably thought about it in some ways of looking at these AI overviews and how many times has our brand been cited, or maybe it's just our content has been cited. Even if we're not getting a link, even if we're not getting the traffic, we have to understand really the attention that we're driving to our brand.
As I'm scrolling through the questions, one of the questions is from Abby, and it's kind of one of those elusive marketing questions. How do you measure the impact? Hold on. It just went. Here we go. How do you measure the impact of AI overviews for your own brand?
Yep. Really good question. There's been a couple of comments that I've been kind of following as well. There are tools. There's, obviously SEMrush. I think with SEMrush and Ahrefs has some stuff around this. We do obviously as well. We'll see more. And there's different layers of measuring this as well. If you're looking at, are you looking at primarily just appearance of the AI review? That's, one level of looking at it. And then also you want to understand if you're looking at it kind of like if you think of like a SEMrush sensor view where you're looking at the entire internet, those are a little bit less relevant. I think it's a lot more useful to look at it for your own data set. So whatever, tracking tool you're using, it should definitely have features that support this. And then there's the opportunity to go even deeper, which is looking at some of the things around, again, that visual impact. What is the text saying? What are the semantic similarities between what's being indexed by Google in the citation links versus their overview text? So you can kind of go as deep as you want to, and it's really going to come down to what's going to be the most relevant for your team to take action on.
Yeah, that's right. I would add, we are often thinking about the output of generative AI, so what the user is seeing, how the user is interacting with it when it comes to metrics. I think we also need to consider the inputs. We've done this in SEO for years, right? Where we do consider crawls and how our site's being processed and how it's then being indexed. And then therefore the output is getting clicks and rankings and traffic and money and all that. So with AI, I think some of those things are going to be important as well to better understand what bots are consuming what content, right? And really building a picture of like, what does that mean for the output? What does that mean at the end of the day for the user? And we're going to, as I mentioned before, we're going to have to make decisions if that is something that is valuable to us for that particular bot.
Okay, so a couple questions around Bing. So Liam is asking, I'm curious to know how you think Bing may play into the search in the search in the future. LLMs like ChatGPT use Bing's engine to generate search, and I know there was a question around like leveraging index now and pushing to Bing. So, yeah, anything around Bing that you can add here?
Yeah, I think we brought this up a little bit in the presentation that Bing is powering a lot of these kind of RAG processes right now. So optimizing for Bing is going to be even more important, even though maybe your direct traffic from Bing isn't increasing directly. But there's indirect ways to influence some of these RAG processes. So I definitely think you want to think about that.
Definitely. And obviously there's Copilot. And in my opinion, it's worth understanding how these RAG processes work in general, because it's at the end of the day, it's the same thing, whether it's AI reviews on Google. Obviously Bing has their own version of AI reviews, which if their traffic grows, we'll see more of that. You have Copilot. And then of course, Bing's index is powering a lot of these RAG systems and the newer chat-based AI search engines.
All right. So Haley asks, does structured data matter for showing up in SERPs today and AIOs specifically? Schema dead? No?
Schema's not dead. Yeah.
I think it's more alive than ever. I don't know if we know exactly how it's being used, but we do. I mean, we can make some assumptions that as these conversations, proliferate and there's more of them, there's more real-time information that's needed. These engines and these indexes and these generative search, they're going to need to process that information even more quickly. So structured data, whether it comes in the form of schema or structured data in the form of feeds, is going to be increasingly important.
Ryan asks, how can I reliably track the rank of queries? Bright Edge tells me certain queries rank 46, but it's the top article mentioned.
Yeah, this is one of the challenges with, it kind of goes into what is the source of your data. We talked at the beginning of this about kind of the mini SERPs that are appearing. And if you look at a SERP and you look at whether it's an AI review or a product carousel or anything else, you're seeing essentially interior rankings of all of these. And so it's going to become very important to be able to measure those inner ranks across every type of element, not just AIOs, but all the different SERP features and building KPIs around that. Otherwise, you're just not going to have any visibility. And unfortunately, like a traditional organic only ranking, while it's still very important to monitor, that alone is not going to fill in enough of the story to explain things back to people.
So we talked a lot about content, and I think that this kind of like pairs it or gets a little more in depth. So with AIOs appearing more frequently for informational searches, do you recommend creating upper funnel content or focusing more on middle lower funnel content, targeting queries that may not trigger an AIO?
Well, good. Take that one, Tim.
Yeah, let me think about this for a second. It's a great question. I
have an opinion on it. I can start with. So
please.
I think, especially with the rise of the AI search engines, we've all been trained to look at the world through the perspective of search volume and potential traffic and building traffic, models based on those different things. It's still important to do. That's not going away, but you also have to start thinking about things a little bit differently in terms of you aren't going to get a search volume model for ChatGPT or Perplexity or any of these other search engines. The data just isn't out there. That may change in the future, but you don't have it right now. So how do you build that? And then it really comes down to asking, okay, but if we know that some portion of our users are going to be asking questions about things that are relevant to our brand, and you care about those users, why would you not want to be visible in the AI search engines for those types of questions? And so then the question really becomes, well, how do I know what those questions are going to be? And we're kind of spoiled because we actually have a lot of really valuable data with people also ask type queries. You can mine that data and turn that into things that would be useful to monitor, because I would say it's reasonable to assume that most of the questions that would be asked about a certain topic probably have already been asked in one form or another on the search engine. So you can turn that into triggers for monitoring what things would look like on the AI search engine side of things. So that can help you understand whether or not that's going to be relevant for AI type searches in general. And then for AIO specifically, as we saw in the data here, the informational intent using those types of things can also generate a lot of additional appearances.
Awesome. Well, with that, we're at the top of the hour, gentlemen. That was a very, very quick hour. Great information. And we will send all of these questions over to you all at Botify and DemandSphere. But Tim, Ray, before we let you go, is there anything else that you want to leave our audience with?
I would just kind of where I started is that I really do believe that we are at the SEOs in particular at the tip of the spear of this thing. And there's a lot of great opportunity. I'm so happy to see most people were optimistic about the industry, because there's not only like so much opportunity to take advantage of, there's also a lot of opportunity to learn and even pivot into new things. So it's really great to see that. It's really great being here.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you both. Thank you both so much. Ray, I'm sorry, kind of cut you off. Do you got anything to add there?
No, I think it's a really interesting discussion. Tim and I have had a lot of really cool things to talk about. There's a lot more to go into. So hopefully we'll be able to connect with some people going forward.
Awesome. I love it. I see the book a demo link for you both in there. Same links in the handout tab. So for anyone out there, give those a click. Stick around. We got a quick survey for you just to let us know how everything went today. But we're going to close this out with a quick poll because we forgot this one, you guys. So which search platform is currently your top priority? So anyone left? It'll pop out. Take that that poll for us. Stick around for the survey. I'm going to close this out. Ray, Tim, thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See everybody on the next SEJ webinar. Have a great day.
Thank you.